All right, we're late. Good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Basra Daf Ches. We're starting 3 lines down on Ches Amud Aleph, and we'll be learning to Tes Amud Aleph about 10-ish lines down, 12 lines down. First of all, that's how the shiur was truncated by Rabbi Resnick, my Rebbe. But also on Shabbos, as you will soon see, we have a lot of ground to cover. So Thursday night includes. Yeah, it's great. These are well known. Yeah, it's very exciting. But that also means that Thursday night is Tes and Yud Amud Aleph, which is huge. We'll do that. And Shabbos is Yud Amud Beis and Yud Aleph, which is huge. So, right, but then Sundays is a little shorter. So what we're gonna do, as we always do, which is try and do as much as possible. Tomorrow is the 4th. I don't know if that's a chisaron or a strengthening of my learning. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens at home. All right, Ches Amud Aleph, 3 lines down. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda Rama Karga Arabanan. He charged the rabbis a head tax, which was an uncommon thing. Amar le Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Avras ade oraisa ve'ade neviye ve'ade chsuve. You violated every book we have. You violated the Chumash, you violated Nevi'im, and you violated Ksubim. And now the Gemara is going to go through all of them. By the way, this is a great retort. When someone does something wrong, you give them just a triple hit. You've broken every law under the sun, and then you need Mari Makomos to back it up. The Oraisa, the pasuk says, "Dechsiv af chovev amim." Even when there's love for the nations, kol kedosha biadecha, your holy ones should still be in your hands. What does this mean? The Gemara says, "Amar Moshe lifnei Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono shel Olam." Afilu b'shah she'ata mechabev amim. Even when you have love for the nations, kol kedosha biadecha, which should still be the case that the holy ones are in your hands. What does it mean? V'heim tuku l'raglecha. What does the word tuku mean? Tani Rab Yosef, elu talmidei chachamim. They crush their feet. We have it easy, but back in the day, people used to have to walk to go hear the Rebbe. They weren't downloading a podcast; they had to go to hear the Rebbe. They walked, yeah, Mamash. We were just a punk, exactly. And I didn't even know it was in my head because I forgot that this was happening. But yeah, they had to work hard. That's what it's mekatasin, and that they were crushing their feet. That was their job, but their job was not to pay taxes. Their job was to sit and to learn and to be stark and to not focus on the worldly things. What about the psukim in Nevi'im that show that the Rabbanan should not have paid this head tax? The Gemara says, Gam ki yidnu bagoyim ata akabtzem v'yechalu me'at mimasa melech b'sarim. And Amar Ula says, what does this pasuk mean? He says, pasuk zeh b'lashon Aramis ne'emar. We're going to learn this with an Aramaic or Aramean. Hey, I don't remember which one it is. Anybody know? I think it's Aramean actually, but I'm not sure. Aramis. Itenu kulhu. If all of you are learning, meaning you Jews out in the middle of nowhere, you Jews in Chutz La'aretz, ata akabseim. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will redeem us. That means that if we are all learning, or at least a far majority of us, then we'll be redeemed. If only a few of you are learning, which is our Metzias right now. Look at the United States Jewry. The percentage of Jews that are learning stark is small, a percentage-wise. Saying within the shtat, it's a pretty good percentage of people who are in the base medrash. If you count Orthodox Jews and how many have Kiyusitim L'Torah, it's probably a reasonable number, but there's more Jews that aren't learning than are. So then Yichal Mimasa Melech B'Sarim. Then you'll be able to overlook at the taxes. You won't have to pay all the head taxes. So that's a pasuk in Nevi'im that shows that there never should have been a din like we saw at the top of the page. That Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said that there was a karga on the rabbis. And ad Ksuve, we're a third of the way down, Ches Amud Aleph. What about the psukim and Ksuvim? The pasuk says in Ezra. The pasuk says, Minda velo v'halach. These are 3 different types of taxes, as we'll soon see. Lo shalit nemer ma'alem. You're not obligated to be a part of them. What does that mean? V'amar Yehuda minda zumanas hamelach. This is a portion that goes to the king. Balu zikesev gulgalta. That's a head tax. V'halach ze arnona. These 3 parts of the pasuk are referring to different taxes. The arnona is a tax on animal food, those kinds of things. And that's how we see over there that those are things that should only apply under certain circumstances, but they don't apply to people who are Talmidei Chachamim. Rav Papa Rama Karya Chadata Ayasme. Rav Papa, when there was a new hole to be dug, he would place that even on Yesomim, which is a little bit unique. Why should Yesomim have to pay for that? They're already in a shver matzah. Maybe when they dig, they won't be successful. They won't find water. That's what they were digging for. So if that's the case, it's going to be unfair. They have to invest money. They don't have a lot of money. Now they're investing, but maybe they won't succeed in actually building, digging and reaching water. Mishkal we will take the cash. In midvel, if the water works out, then great. Then we're not going to keep the money from the asomim if they don't strike water. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Hakol Ligle Gapa. Everybody has to be invested in the Gapa, which is the stopgap measures that they open up a community, the doors, the bars, those kinds of things. Afilu miyasme. That applies even to some of Rabbanan lo tzrichin tirusa. But people who are Talmidei Chachamim, or it says Rabbanan, these people are lo tzrichin tirusa. They don't have to pay for things that aren't shaykh to them, and they don't need natira. It's all the famous stories of David. The Malach HaMavos tried to get him. He was sitting and learning stark. No one could get him. If we never stop learning, then we'll be safe. That's what the Gemara says. Hakol Lakaria Pasya. The Gemara says everyone needs to be involved in digging of pits. Afilu me Rabbanan. This is a chiddush already. Here, because there is something that the rabbis are better. This is not like security. Security they don't need, so they're fine. The Rabbanan, they don't need to have an alarm system in their house. It does lower your insurance, but it's about all that it does. But when it comes to something that they do benefit from, let's say a water pit, then the Rabbanan, they do have to be involved in that. However, the rabbis are only involved in the digging of pits from a financial end if people aren't going out and actually digging. But if you have a group of people going out with shovels to dig, then then it's pasnished. A rav should not be out in the field with a shovel digging pits. Kashya, Yitzchak, and all the pits in the Torah, I don't know. Yeah, you got to go figure that out. But the Gemara says that the Rabbanan, it's not shaykh by them to do that. The story that I heard this in the name. Oh, wow.
He had a lot of, all the others had a lot of it. They did a lot of, I doubt they needed to a lot of labor.
Very good. Zid Chavareva, Zichron Tzadik L'Racha. Remember, he spoke in the old Makor, and he was talking about Leitzanus. And he said, I don't want you to make Leitzanus about what I'm going to say, but there were people who couldn't even stick their tongue out when the doctor would say, please stick your tongue out. It's pasnished. It's not the way that people are supposed to behave. Yeah. You eat pizza, he uses as an example, you eat pizza with a fork and a knife. You don't shovel food in your mouth. They couldn't bring themselves to do it. So that's what we're talking about. You go see the Rabbanim of our shul digging a well. It's not shaykh. Like it should not be shaykh by us to ask them, and it should not be shaykh by them to do it. So that was what I remember so clearly what he said. Like I remember I was sitting when he said it. He's like, Mila achas shel leitzanus could ruin the whole thing. He's like, don't miss what I'm saying here. I'm not saying you can't eat pizza. I'm not saying you can't go grab a shovel. I'm not saying that. But when you're chashuv, so then things become pasnished. They become not shaykh for you, which is a beautiful idea. Okay. So the Gemara says about halfway down on the page, 6 lines before the middle width lines, Rebbe Pasach Otzos B'Shnei V'Tzoras. In the times of Rebbe, there was a famine, and he would open up the storehouse. He was like a Yosef, and he opened up the storehouse. Amar Yikansu Bali Mikra Bali Mishnah Bali Gemara Bali Halacha Bali Haggadah. Anyone who learns, that's your entry pass. You got to come share a vort, and then you can come in. About Amei Haaretz lo yikansu, but people who are Amei Haratzim, they're not allowed to get the food. Dachak Reb Yonasan ben Amram benichnas. Reb Yonasan ben Amram was a Talmud of Rebbe. What it doesn't say over here is that he was dressed up, and he made it seem like he was an Am Haaretz. He didn't want to ever benefit from being a Rav. He wanted they're always just pure, very erlich, very sincere.
Obviously, he's called Rebbe. Rebbe.
Yeah. No, he was chashuv, as we'll soon see how chashuv he was. Yeah. So Amar Lo, this person, Reb Yonasan ben Amram, looks up at Rebbe and says, Rebbe Parnaseni. And because he was in a Purim costume, Amar Lo B'ni Karis, have you read any Chumash today? Amar Lo Lav. No, he says, Shanis, have you learned any Mishnais? Amar Lo Lav. Imkain b'ma farnasech. You don't have your entry ticket. You're not learning stark. I can't let you have access. Amar Le Parnaseni Kekelev Uche Orev. Feed me like a peasant dog. Feed me like a raven. I have no food. What do you want me to do? So Parnaseh. He caught Rebbe's heartstrings, and Rebbe gave him some food. Basar the Nafak, after Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram left, Yosef Rebbe v'kam yitztaer. Rebbe was upset at himself. If you paused here, what would you think he was upset about? So says the Gemara, V'amar oili shenasati piti la'am ha'aretz. I shouldn't have done it. I should have held stark. So it's an unbelievable thing. This wouldn't fly nowadays. Saying it's not, it's like it just wouldn't fly. Amar Lefana Reb Shimon bar Rebbe. Reb Shimon bar Rebbe, his son. So it's Reb Shimon, Rebbe's son, said, Shema Yonasan ben Amram Tameichahu. He knew. He's like, this is like a shtick that Yonasan ben Amram would pull. Shena Rotze lehanos mikavatar miyamav. He was mocked, but he never wanted to get any hana from his Talmud Torah. Bad Kuva Ashkach and Taka, they found out it was him. Amar Rebbe, Yikansu Akol. If this is the way that my Talmidim are, that they have to only come up with a ruse to get food, that means that they're not getting food, and that's not acceptable. So he changed his rule to say that anyone's allowed to get. And therefore, because of the rare Yonasan ben Amrams, he allowed even Amei Aratzim to come in, because he didn't want people to be using Torah as a stepping stool. Torah is supposed to be its own thing. It's not meant to elevate your stature. It'll elevate your neshama, it'll elevate you as a person, but you shouldn't be using it as a stepping stool. And Rebbe Lataime, why was Rebbe makbid initially that the Amaratzim should not be involved? To Amar Rebbe ein puranos bala olam el b'shvil am haaretz. Bad things happen in the world because of Amaratzim. Kiahu demei klila, the shadu atveria. There was a tax on the klila, on the crown of the king. The shadu atveria, that they placed this tax on the city of Tveria. The king needed a new crown, bedazzled with jewels and gems and diamonds and rubies and all the beauty, and he didn't want to pay for it. So he went to the city of Tveria and he said, guess what, guys? You're buying me a new crown. So they divided the number, they took the cost of the crown, they divided it by the number of people, and they were going to tax everybody. However, also the Rebbe, they came to ask Eitzah from Rebbe, the rabbis are not paying. Only Amaratzim are paying. Amar Lahu, people said to him, we should have the rabbis pay. It shouldn't just be the Amaratzim. Amar Lahu, lo, short conversation. He says, no, the Amaratzim will be paying, and the Rabbanim will not be paying. Amar lo, Arukinan, we're going to leave. Amar le, shalom, see you later. Goodbye, Amaratzim. Aruku, have a good time, take care. And Arku Palgehon, half of the Amaratzim of Tveria left. And then guess what happened? Dal Yua Palga, the tax went down by half. Meaning the demand on Tveria, let's say the crown was $10,000. They got a message that day, you don't owe us 10,000 anymore, you owe us 5,000. Because we're only half of the Amaratzim. Hasuhanu Palga Kamad Rebbe. The second half of the Amaratzim came over to Rebbe. Amar Leiles Rabbanan Bahadon. Why are we the only ones paying? The rabbis should be paying as well. Amar Lahu, lo, I will not, I refuse. So Arukinan should be Amrulay. They said to him, Arukinan, we're going to leave. So he said, goodbye, good riddance. Aruku, get out of here. So Arku Kulhu, everyone left except for one person. Pashahu Koves. There was one guy who was the guy who owned the laundromat, and he was an Am Haaretz. And you know what Rebbe did? Shadua Akoves. Put the whole tax on the Koves. Arak Koves.
Rebbe did or the
What?
Rebbe did or the
Well, Rebbe was the one who was deciding how Tveria would pay. So Rebbe made a decision that the Rabbanan would not pay and the Amaratzim would pay. So now there's only one Am Haaretz left, but Rebbe held stark all the way to the end. And he threw the full cost of the crown on this one last guy, Arak Koves. He left. And then Paka Klila. Guess what happened? The whole tax dissolved. So, okay, this is all in the world of Rebbe, but the tax he could understand, was only because of the Amaratzim. And therefore, Amar Rebbe, Reisem Shein Parnas Bal Olam B'Shvil Amei Haaretz. All right? Very good. It's a parsonage. It's there's like certain exceptions to the rule, although ours is not b'hashgacha pratis. It's with an ounce of kindness from the government that people who are in the not-for-profit space like myself have parsonage. It saves me, I don't know, $15,000 a year in taxes. It's not insignificant, just. All right, so says the Gemara, we learned in our mission of Akami Hebeir V'Eka'an She'ir, we were discussing how long does a person have to be considered a member of the city in order to be paying the fees of the members of that city. We had said in our Mishnah 12 months. Says the Gemara Mini, we have a Gemara in Sanhedrin that seems to say differently. We said 12 months, but hachameres v'hagameles hoveres b'makom l'makom. If we have groups of chamorim and gamalim that are going from place to place, v'lana b'socha, they end up in a particular city, and in that city, v'hudcha imahen, at that point, more than 50% of the city was worshiping Avodah Zarah. That puts it into the category of Ir Hanidachas. And typically speaking, people who are violated Ir Hanidachas are killed b'saif and all of their properties are burned. But this person, this group of people where they were overes mimakom lamakom velana, they were just sleeping over that night. So what's their din? Are they irani dachas people, and therefore it's besaif and all their belongings get killed? Or are they not irani dachas people and they have a different consequence? So the Gemara says, hein beskila mamonan palat. They don't get killed besaif, they get killed beskila, and their money can be salvaged, which means that they're not full irani dachas people. However, v'im nishtau sham shloshim yom, then hein besaif mamonan avad. Had it been that they stayed over for 30 days. Oh, so then they're Irani Dachas Jews or non-Jews, whoever they're Irani Dachas people, and then they get killed Besaif and Mamonim Avad. So what do we see from this case of Irani Dachas, this Gemara from Sanhedrin? We see that the amount of time that it takes for a person to become a part of a community is 30 days, not 12 months. Kasha in our Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Amarava lo kasha. If a person is trying to move into a city, he's not just passing through. I'm moving to Chicago. So if I'm moving to Chicago, then 12 months is the measure. If I'm just staying over for a bit, then it's 30 days. They're different. It depends what's happening. One is for the guy who actually is trying to live in Chicago, and the other guy is just visiting. Kidditanya. We see this distinction between someone who wants to live in a city and someone who's visiting a city in regards to Mudar Hana. Kidditanya, we're 10 lines from the bottom of the page, and here we have a Brisa, a Tosefta actually from Maseches Sanhedrin. Hamudar Hana me'an ha'ir. If a person says, I will get no Hana from the people in this city, Kol shenishtah hasham, shnei masar chodesh, asar lehanus mimenu. If he's been there for 12 months already as a local, so then the din kicks in, the Isra Hana kicks in. Pachos mikan mutter. Miyoshvei ha'ir. If you're just there for a little bit of a visit, kol shenishta sham shloshim yom asal hanas mimenu pachos mikan mutter lehanas mimenu. And therefore, the Gemara shows us that we have precedence in halacha for this distinction of someone who is moving into a city when we use the measure of 12 months. That's our Mishnah. Masha Enkein in the case of Irani Dachas, where it's 30 days, because they were just passing through. So if it's less than 30 days, then Hein Beskila Umamonon Palat. Masha Enkein, if it would have been that they were people who lived there, that's 12 months. If they were just passing through and it was 30 days, then Hein Besayef Umamonon Avad, and the halacha changes. Says the Gemara, okay, I understand your distinction, but we still have a problem. Our Mishnah says Yud Beis Chodesh, but there are other thresholds in halacha, as we're about to see. Vatanya. We have a brisa, which we saw on Zion of Beis. Well, we saw pieces of it. Shloshim yom letamchui. There are 30 days. If you live in a city for 30 days, then you're shaykh to the tamchui. The tamchui is daily dispersals. That's the money that, let's say, if Rabbi Robinson uses a discretionary fund, Rabbi Schechter, when they're giving money to Meshulachim who come in, so that money would be tamchui money. Shlosha chodashim le-kupa. They have to live, a person who has to be shaykh to the kupa, and the kupa is a weekly dispersal of food, so then you have to live in a city for 3 months. Shisha l'ksus, if you have to live in a city for 6 months to be shaykh, to be obligated to support people's clothing. Tisha l'kfura, you have to live in a city for 9 months for burial obligations. And shnei masar l'pasei ha'ir, and 12 in regards to city boundaries, city security. So what we see from here is that our Mishnah was a bit of a pashtan, our Bala Mishnah was a bit of a pashtan to just say 12 months. It's not broad enough. There's so many other distinctions that need to be made. We just went through so many of them. Food and burial and ksus, and how could you just casually say 12 months? So it says the Gemara, Amar Avasi, Amar Rav Yochanan, Kitznan nami masnisin shnei masar chodesh lepasei ha'ir tnan. You're right. Our Mishnah was only talking about borders of our city, which taka was the case in our Mishnah. But you're right. The other parameters are true. We're not denying it. We agree. This brisa that we have about 30 days for tamchui, 3 months for kupa, 6 months for clothing, b'chule. All of that is accurate. Our Mishnah was only dealing with pasei ha'ir, which is 12 months. That's why 12 months was mentioned. But you're right. You're right. It really just depends on what's going on. The Gemara says that the 7 lines or so from the bottom of the page on Ches Amud Aleph. Now that we've been talking about the borders of the city, in regards to those borders of the city and keeping things safe, even Yisomim have to pay. Aval Rabbanan lo, the Rabbanan lo tzrichin itirusa, similar to what we saw in the beginning of today's daf, that if you are a Talmud Chacham, if you're a Rabbanan, you don't need help. You're fine. You're fine. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, L'shura, u'leparsha'a, u'letarzina. The Gemara says that for these 3 different things, for wall repairs, the parsha is someone on a horse who goes around the city to keep the city safe. And tarzina is someone who basically guards the weapon depot of some kind. I'm wondering if the word Tarzan, if someone was medayik, like a Rav wrote the script, you know? You don't think so? I wouldn't be shocked. There are so many things like that. Yeah. I don't actually know. I'm not. So,
I've seen shows where they use the word emes.
I've never seen that. Yeah. Not like,
No, like
Stisel.
literally in the conversation.
Uh-huh.
Telling you, this is the emes.
uh-huh.
In the middle, it was in, I think, heart to heart, which is before you were born.
I just saw a clip yesterday of a movie that spoke about an Eruv openly, like a totally secular show. What?
Oh, I know about some.
I've seen.
Oh, I don't even know. What is that?
They're making plans, and they got Sunday, they were making plans to do some military.
Oh, yeah?
Sunday, that's Torah,
Oh, really?
which unfortunately,
Yeah.
Jews you were speaking of earlier, many don't, even Jews
They're
don't
not
know
holding.
what it is. So.
They didn't know what October
Try
7th
to
was.
picture
Wow, they had no
something
idea.
from like the 80s. And we sitting in the movie theater, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
When they heard that line?
100%. 100%. Anyways, just a reference that there's overlap of language, like the Hebrew word of maven and the English word of maven and the same thing. There's like a bunch of words like that. Copacetic, colbaseder. There's like a bunch of words that are very similar to one another. Oh yeah. Oh, wow. Oh yeah, I'm such a day school. I can't even think about that. It didn't even cross my mind. Absolutely, that's great. That's going to be my new company, Lasuris Eretz Canaan. That's great. I have to do Latour though, otherwise to speak like a. All right, let's go. So in those cases, for all of these roles, again, for the walls of the city, for the security people, and for the tarzina, for the people who watch the weapons, all of these people, all of these rules are paid for Iva Filim Yasme, but no rabbis. Klala de Milsa. Here's the general rule. Kol Milsa de Islu Anamine Afilim Yasme. Once someone is benefiting, they have to pay, and the fact that you're a yasam doesn't pater you. The Rabbanon are only pater because it's not shaykh by them. They don't get hana from the protection, so they're pater. Why would I want to pay for something that I have zero benefit from? Property tax would be a great example, right? So that goes to my kids' education. So if we had our way, we'd say that doesn't make sense. Put our money to our kids' tuition or don't. But like, how am I paying for other people whose kids go to school? You know. Rabba Ramatstaka Yasme the Bebar Marion. This is fascinating. Rabba made Yisomim give tzedakah. What's going on here? Amar le'abai v'hatani Reb Shmuel bar Yehuda in poskin tzedakah le'yisomim afilu l'pidyon shvuyim. You don't hit up Yisomim even for pidyon shvuyim. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. Says the Gemara, you've misunderstood me. Amar le'ana la'ach shuvinhu ka'avidna. I did it to make them feel chashuv. I wanted them to feel just like their father did. They were Yisomim. They saw their tati. Someone knocked on the door. They would take out their credit card. They'd take a ruble. They wanted them to feel chashuv. They're yesh b'zeh davar ma. Person feels good sometimes when they give tzedakah. Not all the time, but sometimes. So that's what he was going for. 3 lines from the bottom. If Rahormez imei de Shvur Malka, if Rahormez, who was the mother of Shvur Malka we've seen already has a couple of different possibilities as to who this is. Shadra Arnaki de Dinri, the Kamid Rav Yosef, gave over a wallet of gold or a bag of gold to Rav Yosef. Amra, she said, "Lehava the mitzvah rabba." This money should be used for a mitzvah rabbah. Yosef Rav Yosef become einba. My mitzvah rabbah. What is it? What did she mean? Well, all the mitzvahs are awesome. We don't schar mitzvah b'hai al malaka. We can't even distinguish between them. Okay, a couple of them say Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. Right? So there's a couple. So Amalei Abai Midatani Reb Shmuel bar Yehuda in Poskin Stakale Sama Filad Pidyon Shvuyim, because Reb Shmuel bar Yehuda just used this language of we don't make you someone pay even for Pidyon Shvuyim. What does that word even teach us? Shma Mina, turning to the top of Chesed Beis, Pidyon Shvuyim, Mitzvah Rabbahi. That's what it seems. That's what it seems. Amalei Rabba the Rabba bar Mari, Ha Milsa da Amar Rabbana de Pidyon Shvuyim Mitzvah Rabbahi. Where do we learn about this? Amarlei Dechsiv, it says, "V'haya ki yomer lecha anan neitze, ve'amras aleim ko amar Hashem asher lamus lamus, v'asher lecherev lecherev, v'asher larav larav, v'asher l'shvi l'shvi." So this pasuk is talking about the various forms of bad things that happen. We have maves, cherev, ra'av, and shvi, in that order, and they're in a specific order. It says the Gemara 6 lines down. V'am Rabbi Yochanan kol meucher b'pasuk zeh kasher mechaverim. This is in ascending order of less bad to most bad. So the least bad is going to be maves. After that is dying by cherev. After that is dying by ra'av. And after that is being held captive, which of course is a heartstring for us all. Cherev kashimi maves. Dying with a sword is worse than dying with a natural death. Ibaisema krav, ibaisema svara. I can tell you from two different ways. Ibaisema svara, high kaminva. When a person gets killed with a sword, it's not pretty. It's a disgusting death. High low kaminva. When a person dies a regular death, their body's intact. It's not bloody. It's not gory. It's nothing. Yakar b'nei Hashem amav salachasidav. Maves is yakar. That's precious. But the other forms of death are not so precious. So we were able to show that cherev is worse than regular maves. Rav kashem echerev. How do we know that famine is worse than cherev b'baisem svara? It could be that there's just a regular svar, because how come it's dire? There's a lot of pain when a person is in famine, when the person's being starved. When a person dies with a cherev, they're at least not starving. Black on white, the pasuk says that way. When a person's held captive, they're always mistreated, as we all know full well. So that's what's happening over here, is that we know that the shvi is the worst, and that's what Ifra Hormuz was going after when she gave the money to Rabbi Yosef. And Rabbi Yosef was to spend that money on this big mitzvah. This is what it was about. Let's get into some of the halachos of dispersing money. There are people in the community who spend much of their time dispersing money to poor people. You look at an organization, Ledugma, like the Chicago Mitzvah Campaign, the Chicago Chesed Fund, or Chesed Chicago now. All the various organizations that help you. There's a lot of them. So there are halachos about these things. We have to make sure that that we're dispersing them within the confines of halacha. And the Gemara says a quarter of the way down, Tanu Rabbanan. Kupa shel tzedakah, the money for tzedakah, nigbeis b'shnaim u'mischalekes b'shlosha. It should be collected with 2 people, and it should be dispersed with 3. Nigbeis b'shnaim she'ein osin siraras al hatzibur pachos mishnaim. When we are doing things that are sirara al hatzibur, it's a bracket in halacha. We need to know what that means. What's sirara? We're going to ask this question later. When siraras al hatzibur are happening, it is never pachos mishnaim. Does that mean that when we go out and collect, when we fundraise from someone, it should be with 2 people? Okay, these are questions. Fascinating. When we disperse from the kupa, which we said was weekly, we said that on the bottom of Chesed Aleph. So that's always done kidine mamanis with 3 people. What about the tamchui, the plate? That's nigbeis b'shlosha mischalekes b'shlosha. That's collected with 3 and dispersed with 3. Shegvuya v'chaluka shav, because they both happen on the same day, as we said on the previous amud. The tamchui was the daily food, so the turnaround is so fast, and you need the 3 for dispersal. For the disbursement, so we have 3. Just it's always going to be 3. Tamchui b'chol yom kupa me'erev Shabbos l'erev Shabbos. Tamchui lani olam kupa lani ha'ir. So either just some terminology definitions that a tamchui is a daily dispersal, a kupa is from one Erev Shabbos to the next. A tamchui is for everyone. A kupa is only for locals. Kupas ha'ir, which is a familiar term we're familiar with. That's because of this Gemara. Urashayim b'nei ha'ir lasos kupa tamchui with tamchui kupa. You're allowed to have the money be interchangeable. Uleshanos l'chol ma'asher yirtzu. And the money is fungible. You can use it in different ways. Urashayim b'nei ha'ir lahasnos alamidos. The people who are the Bnei Ha'ir, they can make rules about midos, which are measurements, v'ala she'arim, on pricing, v'al schar po'alim, minimum wage, and ulhasia al kitzasan. They're also able to be masia al kitzasan. They're able to kind of dole out some consequences for people who don't really listen to these rules, as we will soon see at the end of today's daf. Omar Mar, halfway down on Chesed Beis. Again, we're going till about 12 lines down on Chesed Aleph. Omar Mar, enosin siraras al hatzibur pachos mishnayim yinani mili. Where do we know this rule from, that when it comes to surara, when it comes to doing authoritative things in the community, that you need more than 1 person, minimum 2? Because the pasuk says, "V'hein yikchu es hazahav." Heim is plural. They took the gold. It doesn't say v'hu yikach. It's v'hein yikchu. Suraros hu delo abde. So what we see from here is 2 things. Number 1, suraros. When we're dealing with surara, yikchu es hazahav, that requires 2 people. But hahemune mehemen. But the person is believed to overarchingly be the Gabbai. What that means is that he's the executive director, but he can guide the system, but there are certain aspects of his job that he can't do alone. And Divrei Srara are those things. Misayela, the Reb Chanina, this actually can support what we know as Reb Chanina's Shita. Dam Reb Chanina Maisa, Umina, there was a story, Umina Rebbe Shnei Achan ala Kupa. 2 brothers were appointed on the Kupa. What are two brothers? Two brothers are really one person because they're not Adam. They don't offset each other because the reason we have two people is to make sure that the people don't do things that are dishonest. And it's more likely for brothers to be in cahoots than it is for two strangers. So the Shnei Achen over here is really one person. So he's allowed to be the executive director. There are certain aspects of his job that he can't do by himself. When we have this restriction that Divrei Srara ala Tzibor can't be done with less than two people, what are we talking about? 2/3 of the way down, second of the 2 lines before the fat lines. An example of Srara is when we give out a mashkon for tzedakah, or we take a mashkon for tzedakah, and we even do so on Erev Shabbos. That's an act that can't be done by one person. I don't know how all of this works nowadays and what the applications are in halacha. These are sugyas. It's not stam, but I'm not aware of anyone who goes to ask for a loan from one of the local gvirim, and by definition they have two people. But l'chora, that's seemingly what the Gemara means.
Soros, where you're imposing. Soros means that the community comes around and says, you must give X, Y, Z. It's imposed by the community.
When we started this sugya, 1/3 of the way down, the first line of the brisa was kupa shel tzedakah nigbeis b'shnayim u'mischalakis b'shloshim, and we said nigbeis b'shnayim she'ein osin tzror salatzir pachus mishnayim. You're collecting money.
It's like a citizen.
It's not
Must give. It's not fundraising. It's a tax that they must give. Ad kedei kach, if they show up.
Why
at your house,
are you saying that?
Well, why else would you be mamashkin? They come to his house and he doesn't want to give. They go over to the break front and take something out.
That case I agree with, but the first case of no, I agree with this case. But in the first case, it was kupa shel tzedakah, and we called that sirara.
Is a city requirement. Seemingly non-existent, but requirement to give in. To give Torah, I should say.
Mm-hmm. I didn't think about it that way.
If you look at Rashi at the very bottom of the previous column, all the amounts of times, 1 month, 3 months, etc. That's when are you chayav to give?
I'm saying every year is chayav to give tzedakah. What does that mean?
As part of the community required to give. Every year has a different tzedakah, 100% true. These are communal obligations.
I hear you. I didn't think about it that way. I hear you.
Which, I mean, I think it exists. I don't know what it's like in like in the Reuters Kihil or somewhere like that, or Cetus. Maybe they have.
You mean where people keep halach?
Maybe they have the ability. No, I mean, when you're part of a
Yeah.
Kihila in the true sense of the
Yeah,
word.
I hear you. So you're saying it's more forced and not just regular fundraising.
Right, that's Srovers. Srovers means.
I understand the words. I didn't read. Right, you're right. But I didn't read kupa shel tzedakah as a surara type of thing in the authoritative way. It just seemed to me that when you do collecting, not when you do the mandatory collecting.
Collecting means collecting.
No, yeah, that's what you're saying. I hear you. Loud and clear. Got it.
As opposed to fundraising.
Right. That's definitely not okay, I hear you. Oh, so says the Gemara, first of the long lines, 2/3 of the way down. Aini, is this really true that you can do this? That you can be mamashkan on an Erev Shabbos? I'll have a consequence for those who oppress people. You can't just go take things out of people's homes, even if you have two people, even if there's a din srara. No one's pater from being a lochet. You're not allowed to oppress people. But I'm taking a mashkon from your house. You're a gaver rabba. You're a philanthropist. You're a multi-millionaire, multi-billionaire. If I take something out of your break front, you won't even know that it's missing. It doesn't matter. You're amid. You have the bandwidth to handle that. No problem at all. And hadalo amid. If I take a mashkon from someone who can't afford it, so that's when there is ufakadti alochatzav that you're going to get alkolochatzav. That's when you're going to get your consequence. The Rav Nasan Bar Ami. He forced Rav Nasan Bar Ami to give over something. Unbelievable idea. Go over to someone and say, "Give me your money." It's like when we bought this building, when we had some contenders who were other possible buyers. Stan and company went to a bunch of people and said, "Give me your money right now," and they said, "Okay, that's what's going to happen. We understand. We got it." The pasuk says, "V'hamaskilin yashiru kezor harakia." What does this mean? The Gemara says, skipping the parentheses, Ze dayan shadon din emes lamito. When you have a judge who adjudicates a case with MS, that is Kezor Harakia. That's the brightness of the sky. So it's a big cover to be a Gabbai Tzedakah because you're like the stars. You're like the stars forever. The Masnisa Tana, the same pasuk, but with slightly different drushos. The Maskilin Yazhiru Kezor Harakia Zeh Dayan Shadan Din MS Lamito Vigabbai Tzedakah. Both of them are the first part of the drasha. What's the rest of the pasuk? Matzdike Arabim Kikochavim Lolam Voed Elam Alamde Tinokos. This is like being a Rebbe. The Gemara tells an awesome story. 3/4 of the way down, Kigon Man, Amarav, Kigon Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas. Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas was a tremendously dedicated Rebbe, and he never left his Talmidim. I don't mean like never, but he went home for dinner. I mean like never left his Talmidim. And the Gemara says, the Rav Ashkeche Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas to have a koi beginta. Rav found Shmuel Bar Shilas in the garden. Amar Lei, when he saw him not with his Talmidim, Amar Lei said to him, Shavkesei lehem nuscha. Did you leave the ones who were entrusted to you? What are you doing in the garden? So Amar Lei, he says to him, it's been 13 years since I separated from my students. Unbelievable. I'm still thinking about that. That's a Rebbe. The Hashkafa, again, you got to go home with your family. This is not Rebbe Akiva territory where you're like, sweetheart, another 12 years, I'll be back. It's not like that in our generation. But the Hashkafa is right. When you have a Rebbe, he's a shepherd. V'rabbanan mai. What about the people who are just sitting and learning? I understand if you want to tell me you're a Gabbai Tzedakah, you're like the Kochavim. You want to tell me you're Dayan Don Emes, you're no problem. You're Kezor Haraki. I understand. Gabbai, good. What about someone who sits and learns? Amaravina v'ohavav kitseis hashemesh bigvuraso. The ones he loves is like the sun coming out from the horizon in its strength. So that is what happens when people learn Torah. Tanu Rabbanan, the Brisa says 12 lines from the bottom. Gabbai Tzedakah, Gabbai Tzedakah, Einan Rishonim Lifrosh Zemizeh. When people are collecting money together, they really shouldn't like go off into their own corners. It looks a little shady. Aval, when they do get to a place like the marketplace, then Poresh Zeh L'Shar V'Zeh L'Chanos. One can be at the gate, one can be at the store, no problem at all. But we would also feel it was shady when you see 5 or 6 guys walk in and everybody turns around in the corner and they're like counting their money. Something doesn't look right. We want to make sure that things look kosher. And a very interesting halacha. Let's say you're a Gabbai Tzedakah and matzah ma'os b'shuk. You found money that is rightfully yours. The derech klal, we say that money has no simanim. You can just keep it. You find a $50 bill and you want to put it in your left pocket, which is not your collection pocket. You're not allowed to do that. You don't get to put it in your private wallet. Not yet. Lo yitnim b'soch kiso. You should put it into the wallet, to the purse that you're using to collect tzedakah. And only you can only separate it from the pack when you get home. Why? Doesn't look right. It looks like you just took money that wasn't yours. Afalpi that it's ladina mutter, but we wanted to create a tzura where the person who's giving out the tzedakah looks extremely yasher. Kayotze similarly, hayanoshe bechaver amanu paro b'shuk. Let's say that I'm in the marketplace. Tex owes me $100. Oh, Phil, here's $100. But really, I'm an executive director and I'm collecting for an organization. I have to take the $100 that he rightfully owed me, and I have a star to prove it. I have to put it with all the tzedakah money, and then when I get home, that's only why. Then you can separate it from the pack.
Errors that happen, not issues.
Yeah, I was concerned about that too. I was, but I obviously it had to be pasha to the person that was the case. Like you had to know, like you have to just know. But it is easy to make those mistakes.
Yeah. So now let's say you get home at the end of the year. Later, you don't have that technically. Now you think it's technically, is it 75? Is it 120? Now you might be taking more out of the tzedakah than.
I agree.
Yeah.
But the Gemara.
It's not, it looks worse.
The Gemara is measuring, what you're really saying, Stan, is that the Gemara is measuring risk. Is it riskier to make that mistake, or is it riskier to look like the optics of being a shady Gabbai?
Yeah.
I mean, the Chacham, this is not a dindo, right? So this is just a way to ensure that the optics of that Gabbai tzedakah are yashar. But I hear you, but that's what the Chachamim were being done between. They had to juggle. They had to figure out which one was more severe, which one was less severe. And then a famous din, we know that Tan Rabbanon Gabbai tzedakah she'en lehem aniyim lechalek. I have extra cash. Portin le'acherim vein portin le'atzman. I can't cash out like that $10 bill for my 10 singles. You can't do that when you're a gabbai tzedakah. You can do it for other people. You just can't do it for yourself. So let's say that Stan's the treasurer of the shul, and this is really not your role to collect money in shul in the pushkas, but let's say it was just for argument's sake. So Stan cannot take the $10 bill that's in the pushka and cash it out with the 10 singles in his wallet. That's not allowed if you're the treasurer, if you're that guy. Do it for other people, but not yourself. Similarly, gaboy tamchui, excuse me. Shein lahem aniyim lechalek mochen la'achim v'mochen la'atzman. They can sell the food; it's going to spoil. Sell it. So then, what they should do is they should sell it, and they should not sell it to themselves. Most shel tzedakah, coins, ein monen osam shtayim ela achas achas. You know, you go to the bank and they're paying out cash, right? You say to them, "Can I please have 100 singles?" 1, 2. They do it one at a time. With the hundreds, they really don't do it. With singles, they don't do it. With a $100 bill, they do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They count them out individually. Don't do 2 at a time. You know, you'll grab 2 quarters with 2 fingers. No, 1 at a time. Because when you're gabbai stuck, you have an acharayis to be not only meduyak, but it also, again, the appearance of being meduyak. Amar Abai Mereish, lo haba Yosef Mar at sipe de bekinishta. Initially, Abai tells us, Mar, who is Rabbah, wouldn't sit on the mats of the Beis HaKnesses. But Kevan Deshama Lahadatanya, then he heard the following brisa. When he heard the brisa said that you're allowed to pivot and change the money that the tzibur has for other things, no problem. Then he was willing to do that. Initially, Mar, Rabbah, would have 2 different wallets. One wallet would be for anyone, for the, let's call them the Meshulachim. And the other one would be for the families of the shul, who they're different wallets, they're different bank accounts. But Kevan Neshama Lahada Amar Shmuel Lerav Tachlifa Bar Abdimi Avid Chad Kisa, having 1 wallet is sufficient. You don't need to make these distinctions. So therefore, what you can just do is ve'asnila. You can make a condition and just say whatever money I want to give, I give to whoever I want to give it to. Then ihunami avad chad kisa ve'asni Allah. He did the same thing, got rid of the 2 wallets, and now he only had 1. Rav Ashi Amar Ana Asnui Nami Lo Tzrichna. I don't even need the conditions. The Ka'asi Adai to Didi Asi. Anyone who comes over to me and is asking me for money, push that they're relying on my das. Any cheshbonos that I make are fine. I don't need to make conditions. I'm in charge. I got it. I'm the gabbai. I got it. I can give whatever I want to whomever I want. There were 2 butchers. They made a deal with one another. They wanted to make sure that business was equitable and that each of them could make a parnasa. That if I worked on your day, you would tear the hide of the animal that I shechted that day and ruin it. And if you worked on my day, then I would do the same thing to yours. It was a way to create a system where we can both make money. I get Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. You get Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Shalom Yisrael. And then I broke the rules and I worked on Stan's day. Stan was upset. Took a knife and cut the hide of the cow right down the middle and ruined it. So also the Kame de Rava. Much as I made this deal, we went to Rava anyways. I'm like, Stan, seriously, did you just do that? And I took him to Rava. And Chayvinhu Rava l'shlume. And Rava said, Stan, you can't do that. You got to pay Phil for the cost of the hide. And we said in the previous Amud that we are allowed to create our own rules. And locally, we created a deal between us. Stan and I had a deal. If I work on Stan's day, he ruins the hide. If he works on my day, I ruin the hide. So why can't we allow this deal to happen? Rava, why are you being the Chayiv Stan if we all agreed to it? Lo ahadr le Rava. Rava would not respond. Odd scenario. Rebbe Shlita, could you imagine if being in front of a Bezdin, Rebbe, Stan and I agreed to this. Why are you being, you would argue. You'd say, Rebbe, Phil and I agreed to this. Why are you charging me? He and I agreed. And Rava stayed silent. Rav Papa chimed in. Rav Papa said, Rav Papa, shapir avadullah hadr le midi. It's actually a good thing that Rava kept his mouth shut. The din is right, but it's good that he kept his mouth shut. Hani mili, when do we say that Stan and I can make up our own deals? That's heicha deleka adam chashuv. That's when there's no dayan in town to paskin the shilas. Aval heicha deika adam chashuv. When there is someone chashuv, then lav kol kiminayu dematnu. Then the conditions that Stan and I made are garbage. They don't know. There's a Talmud Chacham over there, so we should just keep halacha like mentioned. You can't make your own rules. You can't decide you're going to cut up someone. You're not allowed to do that. The Rava was silent because the Adam Chashuv was Rava. It was himself, and he didn't want to. It's a Baal Gaiva. We'll stop right here and pick up Emir Hashem tomorrow night with Tanu Rabbanan 12 lines down on Testament Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.